Thank you, Karthik and the Ambedkar King Study Circle for initiating this series and naming it boldly. Yes, we need to talk about caste with the aim of annihilating it. No doubt this is easier said than done. But part of my objective today is to show what we need to do in order to make this possible. Since this project goes way beyond the domain of law and into the heart of our social lives. It calls for all of us to participate, to plot, plan, be vigilant, and most importantly, to work together. I wanted to begin with a point about social science, especially since many of the audience members may be from science and engineering fields that I have worked in for a few years before becoming an anthropologist. Social science may appear odd or weak in its analytical toolkit in comparison to, say, physics, biology, or engineering. This is because the study of society and human action come with its own challenges. It can afford to be neither a precise science nor become a tool of social engineering. Unlike particles, things, or sedated animals, people talk back. They are not robots. They improvise, and they cannot be studied in controlled conditions. Yet, people act in patterned ways and do somewhat predictable things. This makes human action tend to reproduce, to a large degree, the existing social relations, or what we call social structure, from one day to another. Thus, we normally expect that when we wake up, the basis of our existence has not changed dramatically. This normal expectation, of course, is itself dependent on one's social position and how much one can take things for granted. Of course, there are periods of crises, one of which we are currently living in, and these bring about dramatic changes in the economic, political, social, and cultural aspects of society. So social science has the challenge of capturing a dynamic and only somewhat patterned subject in ways that help us grasp how, when, where, and why the change occurs. That is tough. And it becomes tougher for that kind of social science that seeks to not only understand reality, but desires to change it. I hope you will all appreciate the nature of this task on its own terms. My focus today is on how to conceptualize casteism in order to attempt to annihilate caste. I deliberately begin with casteism and not caste. To be provocative, let me suggest that no one has actually seen a caste. There are about 4,000 odd jatis in India, which is what is referenced when someone speaks of caste. This makes an average of 325,000 persons in a caste, assuming that everyone in India is born into a jati, which is a good assumption to make. Obviously, one has to imagine such a reality, and it is indeed a very rare and gifted person who can claim to have seen a caste. Castes are therefore imagined social groups based on perpetued descent. I emphasize imagined and perpetued because these are claims. They are powerful ideas. At best, only a few generations are actually traceable for most families. This is what we call a lineage or vamsh. Many lineages now make up something called a clan or gotra, which are represented by a fictitious entity, usually a person, maybe like Kaushik or Bharadwaj or something like that, and who is seen as a symbol or a totem for this clan. Native Americans, for example, use birds or animals as totems. A caste then is a collection of clans. So we are clearly in the realm of very tall claims at this point. Therefore, we need to think of castes as claims made about an imagined group. Like nations, they exist only through their symbols, such as caste flags, caste associations, communicative technologies that seek to mobilize the group. Now, in contrast, if we consider casteism we find that it is something that we have all seen, felt, materially experienced, even viscerally. For casteism is about human actions that are related to that imagined entity called caste. These actions could be banal and benign, such as asking someone their family history in a particular manner, seeking to know if meat is cooked in their mother's kitchen, trying to read something into people's names, the way they dress or where they live, intuitively choosing friends who are like us, but without ever asking what that resemblance is, or asking for one's gotra, for example, at a temple, when one is asked to perform an archana. Or they could be more overt and brutal actions, such as preventing someone from using a well or drinking from a shared cup or tumbler, excluding someone from a group, not giving credit to someone or paying someone less for the same work, humiliating someone, or attacking and killing someone for sporting a mustache, for riding a horse at their wedding, having a particular ringtone about Ambedkar on their phone, or sexually violating someone for daring to be successful, for passing an exam, or for finishing a degree. Casteism then are these set of practices. I use the word practices to capture the fact that human actions are many times habituated action, things that we do not necessarily think about, but do them nonetheless. It is a common sense and taken for granted part of our lives. This is because we learn them from a very early age and tend to develop cognitive schemas that dispose us to act in particular ways without us realizing it for the most part. Practices thus reflect social structure. Focus on practices make us view acts of discrimination as a subset of the larger set of practices in society. Discriminatory practices then are just those that can come within a legal purview. I would like for us to keep this in mind as I make 4 points today about casteism and draw 2 implications for the annihilation of caste. So how can we think about casteism and caste? My first point is that casteism is the monopolization of power and wealth on the basis of status claim. Now, status is about prestige and honor. People live and die and kill for status. Status claims are made in overt or covert ways, but they follow a pattern. Any status claim begins with an act of separating into them and us, for example, and this is usually done by claiming some difference between the two. Separation is followed then by an act of incorporating, that is, relating the us and them in hierarchical ways, or saying, for example, that us is above them in some way. Separating and incorporating, or making difference and making hierarchy, are at the heart of status claims. They go together. Status claims are built upon deriving pride about one's own group, but that simultaneously holding the other in a humiliating position or contempt. This is what Ambedkar called graded hierarchy or graded inequality, with, and Ambedkar's quotes are, an ascending scale of hatred and a descending scale of contempt. Status claims require legitimation. They need to be justified. This is usually done through naturalizing that status, perhaps using religion or other cultural reasoning to justify the status claim. But more on that later. Once status claims are made and legitimized in some manner, then the action of monopolizing proceeds. The situation in which two people or few individuals meet is transformed into one about groups, the us's and the them's. The key move here is that those who do the separating and incorporating then control the situation in such a manner that the us benefits at the cost of the them. Two are connected and we need to see them as connected. Casteism enables the us to monopolize power, which is the ability to control and dominate, and monopolize wealth, which is the ability to garner and hold on to resources. Status claims thus lead to monopolies of power and wealth. This is casteism. My second point for today is that casteism is consolidated within sites of everyday life, including the workplace and the family. Workplace recruitment practices and educational credentialism, for example, ranking institutions and stamping people for life from those institutions as having the abilities or lack thereof. This is something that we are very good at. Now, these are standard casteist practices. This ensures that monopolies continue unabated. Further, the monopolization is complete when the power and wealth is shared only within the us over generations through ensuring endogamy or marriage only within one's jati. So far from being a private matter, arranged marriages, which are usually within the us, enables casteism by aiding the reproduction of monopoly of power and wealth through patriarchy, control over people's sexuality, and assigning gender roles. Other sites, such as housing, credit networks, healthcare access, informational capital, or where one gets one's information from, and more mundane sites such as markets, shopping malls, restaurants, transportations, and of course places of religious worship, all are also part of the reproduction of casteism. This leads to my third point, which is that casteism operates through inherentist and essentialist bias. Status claims are based on two particular habits of thought that shape action. The first is inherentist bias, which is the a priori identification of individuals as members of social groups with particular traits or attributes. That person then is not an independent individual anymore, but only stands as a marker of a group. John Doe, for example, ceases to be John Doe, who's an individual with a lot of complexity, but becomes simply a Dalit, a category with particular group traits. The second bias is an essentialist bias, the assumption that groups have unchanging or essential traits. This operates interestingly across caste groups. For example, in an empirical study by Professor Mahalingam in Madurai, Brahmin men and women were shown to think in far more significantly essentialist ways than Dalits. In the Cisco case, the initial act of outing John Doe establishes the separation and incorporation of John Doe as different from others and in some way as inferior to them, largely due to inferences about merit. This follows inherentist and essentialist bias. In turn, the workplace becomes a place for enacting a series of action by John Doe's bosses that aid their own relative monopolization of power and wealth. If you are with me thus far, then here is my fourth point about casteism. Casteism inherently justifies itself as cultural differentiation. Let's unpack this a little bit. Here is a trick question. What is the difference between any two castes? If you are thinking in terms of difference in behavior or looking for different abilities in different caste members, then you have already fallen prey to the trick. Picking any one of these options only legitimizes or rationalizes casteism. This is because of two reasons. The first is that there is enough variation within any caste group. That is, all behaviors and abilities can be assumed or shown to be distributed normally within the group. So it is difficult to say that a particular behavior or trait is what characterizes a caste group. But there's a deeper reason. Casteism itself demands the production of difference. Remember how status claims assume difference and then make that difference matter? Now, 75 years or so ago, Ambedkar had noted that social distinctions recognized by Hindus in their everyday lives, quote, are the result of the Hindu instinct to be different from his fellow, which has resulted from the belief of people being innately different, end quote. This is a much neglected insight by Ambedkar, and in some ways, he actually presaged some of the social science perspectives on the social construction of identities. So the only difference between any two castes is the claim that they are different. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy, nothing more. This notion of difference aids the justification of casteism. No casteist admits to being one, we know that. So as more and more people challenge casteism, a new way has emerged over time to justify it by masking casteist practices as cultural differentiation. Thus we can hear, I am not a casteist, I just do not like your culture. But what is missed out from this refrain is, but you do not like my culture because of my caste. Is that not so? For example, since it is difficult to openly state that Muslims and Dalits need not apply, the sign vegetarian only for apartments acts as a camouflage for casteism and communalism. For how is someone identified as a vegetarian or meat eater in the first place? But of course, by their caste or religious identity. This is thus a vicious cycle. My colleague Suraj Jacob and I have shown using large data sets that every group has significant variation within it, including Dalits and Muslims and Brahmins. About 1/3 of Brahmins eat meat and about 1/3 of Dalits are vegetarian. Indeed, only Jains seem to be a homogeneous group as far as food practices go. So if the Dalit person insists that they are vegetarian, which is a very plausible fact, other reasons will be found to not permit them into the flat. So the cultural reason that is given, that is vegetarianism, is a red herring. I have called this the phenomenon of the culturalization of caste. It makes casteism appear as a benign preference or taste for people like us. We are now in a position to draw out two major implications of such a view of casteism for the Annihilation Project. The first, casteism, the practice, produces caste, the group or identity. The two go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. Annihilation, therefore, cannot mean that we retain caste identities, but somehow get rid of casteism. That is an impossibility, at least in this field. Casteist practices, for example, produce the phenomenon of a caste. Status claims, which are the heart of casteism, conjure up the idea that such a social entity as caste exists with a set of inheritable and essential attributes. Subjecting John Doe to casteism produced Dalit as a category with meaning. Casteism, which is an action or like a verb, then is the cause, and caste, which is the group, or the imagined group, or the noun which references a social group or identity, is its effect. Casteism makes caste matter, to take the title of my brother Suraj's book, Suraj Yangdi's book. Where one exists, the other two comes into existence. So you cannot have caste identities without casteism. This is why Ambedkar called for an annihilation of caste. It means an annihilation of caste identities. This radical call by Ambedkar does not, however, mean that we simply forget about caste in order to annihilate caste. Many of us have heard the refrain, and I've heard this even by deans of certain colleges. Why do you keep talking about caste? Does it not keep casteism alive? Now, this is the caste-blind approach to caste, adopted by many liberal Savarnas, for example. Neither will capitalism simply destroy casteism or patriarchy for that matter, which is a position adopted by many left Savarnas, though hopefully not all. Caste blindness is not anti-caste. It actually keeps casteism in place. The annihilation of caste then requires a caste-conscious, anti-caste perspective. It tells us that to annihilate the multiple sites that are the causes of casteism, for example, caste associations are sites where casteism is reproduced faithfully. Many such organizations exist in the US, such as the Brahmin Samaj of North America, Kana, which is the Kamma Telugu Samaj, and almost every other caste cluster in the US seems to be having its own caste association. Despite their usual justification for why they exist, caste associations are not simply celebrating caste identity. They are actively producing caste identity. Annihilation of caste could begin here by asking, how do caste associations enable casteism? Here is one point where all caste associations will come together to demand in the US diaspora that they be treated as part of the great American cultural diversity or multicultural caravan. A project of annihilation of caste would, however, need to show that caste association is a form of casteism in the guise of culture or the culturalization of caste. Now, that's my first point. The second implication of such a view of casteism is that all caste identities are relational identities. That is, no caste exists independently. For Dalit identity to be part of the annihilation of caste, it therefore needs to be viewed as an anti-caste identity, not a caste identity. Let's unpack this a little bit. Defining the other as different helps to define the self. All caste identities are always relational. No caste can exist simply on its own. Its identity is derived from the fact of separating from another caste. Caste identities then are always part of a caste system based on casteism as graded inequality. This means that we need to view Dalit as a political label for an anti-caste identity and not a caste identity. What brings Dalits together is not any set of attributes or culture. For all culture is contested internally within the group, and Dalits are as heterogeneous as any other group. But Dalits are Dalits because of experiencing casteism and untouchability. That shared experience of casteism is what brings Dalits together. It is a political identity, not a cultural or caste identity. This needs to be kept in mind since annihilation of caste demands an annihilation of caste identities. We can go further. Dalits are arguably the only group that is by definition designed for annihilating caste and the caste culture that comes with it. The anti-caste identity is rooted in Dalit experience, but Dalits cannot do it alone. That experience of casteism needs to resonate with all other castes. For that to happen, we need to build a caste-conscious, multi-caste, and anti-caste movement. Caste consciousness is needed to combat caste blindness, as I mentioned before. A multi-caste formation is needed so that Dalits do not bear the burden of annihilating society of casteism and caste root and branch. This is along the lines of what Anand Teltumde wrote a long time ago. I quote, "Castes cannot be annihilated by Dalits alone," end quote. So annihilating caste requires the active participation of all castes, especially Savarnas. Finally, the anti-caste perspective needs to be foregrounded and sharpened to prevent Dalit from being incorporated into a caste identitarian logic. One cannot seek to preserve caste identity while seeking the annihilation of casteism. To tweak Ambedkar's famous phrase, caste is a monster that will not be contained. It will rear its ugly head until you kill it. I hope to have enabled a conceptualization of casteism that makes annihilation possible. Thank you. Jai Bhim, Lal Salam, Neel Salam.